One of the most dangerous traps a person can fall into is when someone lives in their mind but not in their life. Because what that actually means is that your attention, your most precious resource, the very thing that determines the quality of your existence, has been hijacked. It's been claimed by something that is no longer real. And that's a profound psychological tyranny. When you let someone occupy your thoughts endlessly, when you play over old conversations, relive old memories, and imagine scenarios that may never come to pass, you are handing over sovereignty. You're no longer living with them, you're living under them, under the weight of their shadow. And the tragedy is that they may not even know or care that you're carrying this burden. See, the mind has a strange way of tricking us. Obsession masquerades as significance. You think, if I can't stop thinking about her, it must mean she's important. It must mean this bond was extraordinary. But what's actually happening is that your nervous system is caught in a loop. It's like a scratched record, playing the same line again and again, because your psyche hasn't reconciled the loss. And the longer you let that loop spin, the more you confuse preoccupation with meaning. But they are not the same. Preoccupation is passive. Meaning is active. Meaning builds life. Obsession drains it. Think about it. What does it cost you when someone who isn't in your reality still dominates your inner world? It costs you presence. You're not fully alive to the relationships and opportunities in front of you, because part of you is always somewhere else, stuck in the past or lost in fantasy. It costs you energy. Emotional energy that could be used to pursue goals, to strengthen your body, to deepen friendships, to create something new, is instead wasted on a ghost. And it costs you identity, because slowly, imperceptibly, you begin to define yourself not by who you are, but by who you've lost. And once you cross that line, you become a servant of memory rather than a creator of destiny. There's a reason ancient thinkers warned about this. The Stoics, for example, insisted that freedom begins with mastery of attention. Epictetus would remind his students, don't hand your mind over to things you cannot control. Don't surrender your peace to someone who is absent. Because every time you do that, you're abdicating responsibility for your own life. And what greater tragedy could there be than to waste your finite days rehearsing a relationship that is over, while the world moves on without you? But here's the psychological depth that often goes unnoticed. Obsession isn't only about her. It's also about you. When you can't let someone leave your mind, it's usually because they've become a symbol of something larger, something unfinished within yourself. Maybe she represented acceptance you never gave yourself. Maybe she embodied potential you're afraid to pursue on your own. Maybe she carried the weight of your hopes for the future, and without her you feel that hope collapse. So the mind clings, not because she is the only possible answer, but because letting go of her means confronting the void inside. And that confrontation is terrifying. But this is where responsibility comes in. If you don't face that void, if you don't shoulder the burden of building meaning independently, then you remain enslaved to the idea of her forever. And worse, you risk repeating the cycle with the next person, because the problem was never just her absence, it was your inability to inhabit your own presence. So obsession is not merely a symptom of loss. It's also a call to mature, to grow, to take back the reins of your psychological life. And make no mistake, breaking that tyranny is not a matter of suppression. It isn't about yelling at yourself to just stop thinking about her. That doesn't work. The human mind doesn't forget on command. The way out is through reorientation. You have to deliberately redirect your attention toward what is in your control. You start by recognizing, honestly, that she lives in your head, but not in your reality. And then you ask, what in my reality deserves the attention I've been wasting on this phantom? What actions today could plant the seeds of a future where I am not trapped by the past? It's that movement, small, daily acts of presence, that slowly loosens obsession's grip. You'll notice, if you practice this, that the thoughts still come. They don't vanish overnight, but they lose their sting. They lose their power. They become background noise, rather than a commanding voice. And eventually you stop living under the tyranny of what was, and you begin to live for what is and what could be. So, If she's in your head but not in your life, the message is clear. Don't mistake obsession for love, and don't mistake preoccupation for destiny. Recognize it for what it is, a loop that drains your strength, and reclaim your attention as the first act of freedom. Because the quality of your life will be determined by where you place your mind. And if you can take it back from the ghost of someone who is gone, you can give it to the reality of someone who is here. And maybe, just maybe, that someone should first and foremost be yourself. One of the greatest distortions the human mind is capable of producing is the way we remember people once they're gone. You might believe you're holding on to her as she really was, but that isn't true. What you're holding on to is a reconstruction, carefully edited and polished by your own memory. And memory is not an objective recorder. It is selective, it is biased, and more often than not, it is mercifully unfaithful to the truth. You see, when someone leaves our life through breakup, rejection, or even by choice, we don't simply remember them as they were. We idealize. We cut away the messy edges, the disagreements, the moments of disconnection, and we keep only the parts that soothe us or that reinforce the longing. This is why the pain of absence can feel sharper than the reality of presence ever did. In presence, you saw her humanity. In absence, you are haunted by an angel of your own creation. Now, here's the danger in that. When you elevate someone to that kind of pedestal, when you strip them of flaws and crown them as the perfect other, you simultaneously diminish yourself. Because if she is flawless in your mind, then what does that make you? Flawed, incomplete, always grasping. You place yourself below an illusion. And the irony is that you're not even comparing yourself to her. You're comparing yourself to a memory that never truly existed. That's a rigged game, and you'll lose it every time. Psychologically, this process ties into what Freud once described as the idealization of the love object. In plain terms, when we are in love, or even when we've lost love, we inflate the value of the other person until they occupy a sacred space in the psyche. That inflation can provide temporary comfort, but over time it becomes poison. Because instead of relating to them as a person, someone flawed, finite, human, you relate to them as a god. And you know what happens when you worship a false god? You sacrifice your life at its altar. And here's something worth reflecting on. When you think you're missing her, are you really missing her? Or are you missing the story you told yourself about her? Maybe she represented safety, or adventure, or beauty, or hope. But those are not her. Those are qualities your mind attached to her image. The problem isn't that you can't have those things without her. The problem is that you don't believe you can. And so the illusion hardens, and you cling not to the person, but to the archetype you've created. It's like Plato's cave, but inverted. Instead of mistaking shadows on a wall for reality, you're mistaking the golden statue in your mind for the living, breathing, complicated human being who once stood in front of you. And what makes it worse is that reality can never compete with an illusion. No actual person, no matter how beautiful or kind, will ever live up to the godlike image you've carved out of memory. Which means if you don't tear down that illusion, you risk sabotaging every future relationship because you'll compare them all to the ghost of perfection. So, what's the way forward? It begins with telling yourself the truth. Not the comforting half-truth, not the flattering fantasy, but the whole, difficult truth. She was not perfect. She disappointed you at times. She misunderstood you. She had limitations as you do. And that doesn't diminish the good that was there. It simply anchors it in reality. And reality, while less intoxicating than fantasy, is the only foundation you can actually build a life on. Now, there's something very liberating in that recognition. Because once you strip away the illusion, once you see her as she really was, you free yourself from this endless cycle of longing. And you might even begin to see yourself differently. You stop positioning yourself as the incomplete worshiper before a flawless deity. Instead, you recognize that you, too, are a complex human being. You, too, carry strengths and weaknesses. And in that recognition lies the possibility of genuine relationship, one based on truth, rather than fantasy. But let's be honest, tearing down the illusion hurts. It feels like betrayal, as if by admitting she wasn't perfect, you're somehow diminishing the bond you had. But it's not betrayal. It's reverence. Because to honor someone is not to freeze them in an idealized form. To honor someone is to see them clearly, in all their imperfections, and still acknowledge what they meant to you. That's real love. That's real closure. So if she's in your head but not in your life, remember this. You are not haunted by her. You are haunted by your idea of her. And ideas can be dismantled, re-examined, and reframed. The challenge is to step out of the golden glow of the illusion and into the raw, unpolished truth of reality. Because only in reality can you move forward, only in reality can you grow, and only in reality can you prepare yourself to meet someone new, not as a god, not as a fantasy, but as a partner walking beside you on equal ground. And if you can do that, if you can see through the illusion, you don't just set her free. You set yourself free. There comes a moment, and it arrives for everyone, when you have to face the fact that holding on is not strength, it's avoidance. People imagine that clutching tightly to what has slipped away is somehow noble, as if their refusal to let go is evidence of loyalty or depth. But in truth, it is often cowardice. It's a refusal to confront reality as it stands. And reality, brutal though it may feel, is always the foundation upon which renewal is built. When you keep someone in your mind who is no longer in your life, you trap yourself in a kind of purgatory. You're not fully with them because they're gone. And you're not fully free of them because you refuse to release the image. So you hover in this suspended state where your energy is drained but nothing is created. And the longer you linger there, the more you confuse motion with progress. You feel the constant churn of emotion, the ache, the longing, and you think that means you're alive, that you're engaged with love. But it's not life. It's recycling pain. It's spinning in circles. Letting go, on the other hand, feels like death at first. It feels like admitting defeat. You think, if I stop holding on to her, I'll lose her forever. I'll erase what we had. I'll betray the memory. But that's an illusion too. Because the truth is, you've already lost her. She's already gone. The relationship, as it was, has already ended. What you're holding on to now is not her. It's the fantasy of what could have been. You're trying to preserve a potential future that will never arrive. And the cost of that preservation is your present. It's a deep psychological fact that the human spirit cannot grow without loss. Something must die for something else to be born. That's the cycle of life, written into nature itself. The tree sheds its leaves in autumn so that new growth can appear in spring. The caterpillar must dissolve into nothingness before it can transform into a butterfly. And in the same way, you must let go of the past, fully, painfully, honestly, before you can step into the possibility of something new. Renewal requires sacrifice. And the sacrifice is always this, letting go of the illusion that you can carry everything with you. Now, people resist this because they think letting go means forgetting. But that's not what it means. Letting go doesn't mean you erase the memory.
It means you stop clutching it like a lifeline.
It means you allow the memory to take its place where it belongs, in the past, rather than dragging it like a corpse into the present. It means you integrate what you learned, what you cherished, even what you regret, and then you release the person themselves from your grip. You honor the experience without enslaving yourself to it. And here's something important. Letting go is not passive. It's not just sitting back and waiting for time to heal the wound. Time alone does nothing if you're unwilling to cooperate with it. Letting go is active. It's an act of will. You decide, each day, to place your attention on what is in front of you, rather than on what is gone. You build new habits. You surround yourself with people and pursuits that pull you forward. You discipline your imagination to stop indulging in the what-ifs and start focusing on the what now. And little by little, the grip of the past loosens. This is not easy work. It requires courage. Because in letting go, you have to face the void. You have to stand in the empty space where she once stood and admit that you feel lost without her. That emptiness is terrifying because it mirrors the deeper existential truth that we are always, in some sense, alone, and that no other person can complete us. But if you're willing to face that emptiness, something remarkable happens. You discover that the void is not a barren wasteland, but fertile soil. It is from that emptiness that new possibilities emerge. It is from that emptiness that strength is forged. And think about it this way. If you refuse to let go, you deny yourself the chance to meet the future honestly. You walk into tomorrow carrying yesterday on your back. And the problem with that is that tomorrow has its own burdens, its own opportunities, its own people who need you present. If you're still tangled up in the ghost of what was, you rob yourself of the chance to engage with what is. That is not love. That is not loyalty. That is fear disguised as devotion. So the act of letting go is really the act of faith. Faith in the idea that life has more to give you. Faith in the possibility of growth. Faith in your own capacity to rebuild. And here's the paradox. The moment you truly let go, when you unclench your fists, when you stop gripping the memory as though it's the only thing keeping you alive, you discover a freedom you hadn't known in years. You can breathe again. You can think clearly again. You can see opportunities that were invisible while you were blinded by longing. If she's in your head but not in your life, then letting go is not just an option. It is a necessity. Because clinging to her image is not sustaining you. It is starving you. And the cost of that starvation is your future. You owe it to yourself to set down what is gone so that you can walk into what is waiting. So ask yourself, will you keep feeding the illusion of what was, or will you take the terrifying, liberating step of opening your hands? Because only by releasing what no longer belongs to you can you discover what does. At the heart of this whole struggle, whether it's obsession, illusion, or the difficulty of letting go, lies a deeper question. Who governs your mind? Who has authority over the thoughts that shape your reality? Because if she's no longer in your life, but she still dictates your inner world, then you've ceded sovereignty. You've allowed someone else, or rather the image of someone else, to sit on the throne of your psyche. And until you take back that throne, until you reclaim your own sovereignty, you'll remain a subject of the past instead of the author of your future. Now, sovereignty is not some abstract political idea here. It's profoundly personal. It means that you are the one steering your attention, directing your energy, shaping your values. It means you refuse to be ruled by impulses you don't examine or fantasies you don't challenge. Without sovereignty, you are tossed around like a leaf in the wind, pulled by memory, yanked by desire, crippled by fear. With sovereignty, you stand upright. You have weight. You have agency.
You can decide where your life is going.
And this isn't just about freedom. It's about dignity. Because what are you, if not the caretaker of your own mind? If you don't take responsibility for your inner world, who will? If you allow the ghost of someone who isn't even here to colonize your thoughts, then you've abandoned the most sacred duty you have, to be the guardian of your own soul. And you can feel the cost of that abandonment. It's the restless nights, the endless spirals of imagination, the inability to be fully present in the moment. It's the quiet sense that your life is slipping by while you remain chained to a story that has already ended. But reclaiming sovereignty doesn't happen passively. It requires discipline. And discipline begins with honesty. You have to tell yourself bluntly, she's not here. She's not coming back. And my life is still my responsibility. That statement hurts. It feels like swallowing glass. But it's also the first moment of strength. Because once you accept that truth, you can begin to act from it. And every action rooted in truth strengthens your sovereignty. Part of this process is setting boundaries, not just with other people, but with your own imagination. Think about it. How many times a day do you allow yourself to drift back into a scene with her, to replay an old conversation, to reimagine how things could have gone differently? And every time you indulge that, you reinforce the chain. Sovereignty means saying no to that indulgence. Not because the memory is evil, but because you've decided your energy belongs elsewhere. It means catching yourself in the act and redirecting toward your work, your health, your relationships, your future. You're training your mind the way you'd train a muscle. And that's another important point. Sovereignty is built like strength. You don't wake up one morning and suddenly own yourself completely. You earn it through repeated acts of discipline. You notice when you've slipped, you pull yourself back and you keep going. It's incremental. But over time, the balance of power shifts. She no longer occupies the center of your mental stage. You do. And that shift is transformational because it restores the hierarchy of your life. You are not the servant of longing. Longing becomes the servant of your growth. There's also something deeply empowering in realizing that sovereignty doesn't mean isolation. It doesn't mean walling yourself off from others or denying that relationships matter. It means that you engage in relationships from a position of strength rather than dependency. You don't need someone to complete you, so you're free to love them as they are, rather than as an idol to fill your emptiness. That kind of love is stronger because it's rooted in truth and freedom, not in desperation. But perhaps the most profound aspect of reclaiming sovereignty is this: it opens the door to purpose. When your mind is no longer colonized by obsession, when your energy is no longer drained by illusions, you suddenly have power to direct toward building something meaningful. You can set goals. You can pursue ambitions. You can become the kind of person who not only commands their own attention, but earns the respect of others. And that transformation doesn't just heal you, it makes you valuable to the world. Because the world doesn't need more people trapped in cycles of longing. It needs people who have faced those cycles, broken them, and emerged stronger. And you should remember, sovereignty is not a final state, it's a practice. There will always be forces that try to claim your mind, memories, fantasies, fears, even new relationships. The question is not whether those forces exist, but whether you can meet them with awareness and strength. Whether you can remain the one steering the ship. So if she's in your head but not in your life, the ultimate task is not to erase her, not to numb yourself, but to reclaim the throne of your own mind. To stand tall in the awareness that your attention is yours to give, your future is yours to build, and your dignity is yours to protect. And if you can do that, then her absence ceases to be a prison. It becomes the catalyst for the most important transformation of all, the moment you stop being ruled by the ghosts of yesterday and start ruling the reality of today. Because in the end, sovereignty is not about her, it's about you. And it begins the moment you decide to take back your mind.